Welcome to the Irish NFL Show's NFC North preview in association with our partner QuinBet. We're moving through the divisions one at a time. I think this is our final NFC division now. You can catch the other divisional previews on whichever podcast platform is your favorite one. Do remember to like and subscribe wherever you find the Irish NFL Show. It makes it easier for others to find us and helps to grow the community. And we have a very interesting division for this particular preview. NFC North last year, of course, sent two teams to the playoffs in the end. The Lions, who were within a whisker of making the Super Bowl at the end of it all, and the Packers, who surprised a lot of people with the way they turned up and turned over the Cowboys indeed before falling narrowly to the 49ers in the divisional round. So two strong teams entering this season with very high hopes of returning, and also a lot of intrigue at the bottom end of last year's division with the Vikings and the Bears both going high in the draft to get hopefully their quarterbacks of the future from their perspectives. We'll get to them shortly. But let's kick off our preview with a look at the Detroit Lions. And Shane, as we said, a team that was so close, I said within a whisker, really within the cruel bounce of a ball off a helmet, ultimately is what decided their fate. Will they be in a position to go one better, or could this be a year of regression?
It is difficult to really tell what the Lions are fully capable of in terms of where their ceiling is, because the thing that makes the Lions interesting is at the same time probably their greatest handicap. It is a great contrast to the three Lions, this boring, awful, crap England team we're seeing in the Euros right now, that the Detroit Lions suffer from a case of having balls bigger than their brains sometimes. And I understand that this is the Dan Campbell way, the way of a head coach who drinks 1.2 liters of coffee a day and an extra 4 shots of espresso. A man who really dives into that level of madness, which has made the Detroit Lions seem somewhat of an innovative force when it comes to how they approach much of their game. And look, it has gotten them far. It's the trap that they've almost set it for themselves. The fact that this constant going for it on fourth down, I believe they've gone for it on fourth down more than any other team in the 21st century last season in terms of their percentages. And there's the percentages of converting those fourth down plays when it's not even just 4th and 1, 4th and 2, 4th and 3, 4th and 4. You know, that's almost their gimmick. In a similar way that the Philadelphia Eagles had the tush push, that's almost becoming the Detroit Lions gimmick. And it's kind of worked for them. But the problem is that's going to, if you make that your brand, you make backing your players constantly to get these mad plays over the line, to all these gutsy plays. And look, there's plenty of other in the Dan Campbell catalog of gutsy plays. Calling onside kicks when you're already 7-0 up early in the first half. Fake punts when you're deep in your inside your own red zone. All that kind of stuff, which again is the type of stuff which is fantastic in a video game. And when it works in real life, it's really fantastic. That has built up their floor, but it collapses their ceiling. We saw it in the NFC Championship game last year, how the inability to just make the smart decision and go for the points really kicks you in the ass. There was a 4th and 2 and a 4th and 3, I believe, somewhere inside the 30-yard line, the 49ers 30-yard line. And the second one was again in the same range. Both easily kickable field goals in the modern day. 6 points that was left on the field that they should have taken against a team in San Francisco that had something to fight back for them. To be able to bring yourself to that position that you were in a shot of getting to the Super Bowl, but you just didn't read the room and decided, you know what, I'm going to do the exact same thing I've been doing all year. That becomes your handicap. And it's sad to say, because the Dan Campbell way, again, if we base ourselves off the analytics and all the stuff that comes up on our screen, like, you know, the 50% chance to go for it on fourth down. Like, it's how many times we see now, and ESPN in particular are terrible for it. You know, somebody lines up with like a 4th and 4, and analytics says this has got a 60% chance of getting over. So analytics says go for it. That is the Detroit Lions way. And look, I think many people are looking at that as being the future. And the Lions are maybe being seen as someone who's going to innovate in that. But the problem is, when we get into those big games, and it's going to become more of a problem going forward, it's going to bite them. It's going to bite them, and it's going to more and more. We saw it against the Cowboys when they went for a 2-point conversion rather than just taking the draw and bringing it to overtime late on into the playoffs, and that had implications in terms of their seeding going into the end of it. We saw it in the NFC Championship game, and we're going to see it more this season, because after that NFC Championship game, they've had an entire offseason now to stew on that. And one of two things is going to happen. Dan Campbell's either going to start losing his bottle and not going for it in a way that he used to, which means that the Lions is going to start losing their identity, and that lowers down their ceiling a little bit. Or secondly, teams are going to be able to read these things more effectively. The more of these fourth down plays you go for, the more you realize, okay, this is what we're comfortable doing. We're comfortable doing this kick play, doing this pass play, or whatever. Teams be able to read that, and teams be able to stop it more often, as we saw with the tush push in Philadelphia, how teams have eventually learned to stop that. So it's not really, it's a bit of a kick 22 or whatever, just in Detroit, that you're not really sure what way they should go now that they've lived that experience of getting to a place where the Lions have never gotten before because they've backed their players to do these crazy things. Should they keep doing it and hope that somehow it works? And when they get to the NFC Championship game, they're not against a team where as ruthless as that Kyle Shanahan 49ers offense, or do they remove from their own identity a little bit, and that will end up blunting them.
As ruthless as the Kyle Shanahan 49ers offense that decided to settle for a field goal and lost the Super Bowl, that Kyle Shanahan offense.
Yeah, I know. Look, well, the Kyle Shanahan offense or Kyle Shanahan team in general, which was just badly coached to deal with the overtime situation, but that's a separate conversation. But look, like, it's just, and I really think it's a shame because there's nothing more I'd love to see than the Detroit Lions win a Super Bowl, for a Super Bowl to come to that fan base. But the problem is Dan Campbell is just too nuts. He's just a mad scientist, the Madden scientist almost, that he just hasn't got the ability to plan situations and to play situational football well enough in those key, tight playoff games to actually win a title. Could they win the division? I think so. Can they play well enough over the course of a 17, 18 game season? They have the talent to top this division. They're going to do well in those big games against the Packers, the Vikings, and the Bears. But, they've raised their ceiling, they've raised their floor, they've lowered their ceiling, and that's just where we are with the Lions.
All right, Shane. Brian, for me, I got to say, Dan Campbell puts belief in the tank. There's no coach who seems to me to be getting as much out of his locker room as Campbell is. I'll take a few poor calls on fourth down, and we're not going to relitigate the myself versus Colin argument on whether or not he should have gone for it as often as he did in that NFC Championship game last year. But Lions roster-wise, what do you make of what they're putting on the pitch in 2024? It certainly doesn't look any weaker to me, and they've made a couple of decent free agent signings as well, in my mind.
Yeah, I do want to come back to what Shane has spoken about there, because I think it's relevant to next season, despite it being last season. But I do look at the roster and say, in a division which is arguably probably one of the best in the league now in terms of, I suppose, the teams who will have aspirations to go to playoffs, what's expected of every team, there's high hopes within each fan base. You look at the Lions, and I think they've identified some serious weak links in the team despite a really successful season and going to the championship game. And that primarily is on the defense. They've free agency, they've bulked up on defensive tackles in the draft. They've gone cornerback round 1, cornerback round 2. They brought in various different edge rushers. I think they've recognized that from so many games last season, you could argue they had to go for those fourth downs because they were in positions where their defense couldn't get off the field in large parts of games, and it was essentially required them to be a bit more aggressive, go for it on fourth down, and ultimately come out the right side of so many high-scoring games. I mean, they were a treat to watch last year because of the manner of the games. You think of the game in LA in particular, which I think James referring to on the fake punt on fourth down in his own 20-yard line. But there were so many games last season where they came out on the right side of it, come back in from a deficit against the Bears. You could argue the Bears, gave that game away. And it was really enjoyable as a neutral to watch. But I do think the stigma of not taking those points might come back to bite them even further into the season. We're always talking about a team that has a Super Bowl hangover, but I don't necessarily think it's the team that made the Super Bowl this year. I think it's the team that was in the NFC Championship game, and that is the Lions. I think when we get into situations next season where Campbell is aggressive again, to Shane's point, does he think back to what he missed out on that opportunity to take the points? Does he go with the conservative approach, which you've seen in the past from other head coaches who start to second guess themselves? I don't think he will, but I still think that piece at the end of the season where and you touched on there in the locker room after the game, if you're either with me or you're with me, and this is, we live by the sword, we die by the sword. But you're talking about Kyle Shanahan. It was situational football in the Super Bowl. Kyle Shanahan felt his defense could keep the Chiefs from scoring, so he took the field goal. In that instance, in the championship game, I think we might have been talking about a very different outcome and a very different team conversation now. If they had taken the points, it wasn't to be. I still think they're going to have a great season. I'm not necessarily convinced they'll win the division again. I think teams have made a vast improvement. I think we're going to come to that over the course of the hour in terms of what other teams have done. But I certainly think they're going to be in sweepstakes to win the division. But I'm not convinced it's their year to get to. There's a lot of Lions fans out there who just think it's a running back scenario. I don't. There is with a lot of teams in the league. I don't think necessarily within this division this year it's a running back situation.
One thing they do really have going for them, though, Noel, and I think it's a significant plus considering if you look at what happened, say, to the Philadelphia Eagles last season. They got Ben Johnson reloaded as OC, probably the most highly rated offensive coordinator in the league as far as taking the next step and being a head coach. He's almost certainly going to leave next season. But I suppose like the Bengals last year, they've held on to him for one more year, which tells you that both he and they have confidence in what they're about.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, you can talk about all the players and everything they have there, but Ben Johnson was fantastic for the Lions at OC there, and I think for Goff, he'll be delighted that he's still there. Whatever happened on the plane or whatever, going for jobs that he looked like he was going to get and didn't. I think for the Lions, it's great to have him there for one more season, because I think this offense itself is really exciting. I think they're fully stacked on offense. You've Montgomery and Gibbs at running back. Then you've St. Brown, who's got his new contract. As I say, Goff there has kind of come in, and people who are doubting whether or not he could be the quarterback going forward, whether he's just a bridge or he was the weak link in that whole trade, has turned out to be, he's found his home there working with Ben Johnson, and they've kind of just got everything in sync. And I think, you have Laporta there and then at tight end. So on offense, this team is stacked. And when you keep that continuity with your OC there, who was so successful and who clearly does mesh really well with this roster, I mean, that's just a benefit. And I know Brian talked about it. The defense was where the issues really lay for this team last season, which they really have gone out and seemed to kind of hit those areas that were really bad. It was, i.e. the secondary. I think they were the worst passing defense in the league last season. And for them to kind of recognize that and go out and shore up that, I think this team next year, I mean, I do actually disagree with Brian. I think they will win this division again. I think they are strong enough that they can go and do it. They could potentially have a hangover, and whenever a season ends for a team the way theirs did, it is interesting to see how they pick it up again. But I think Dan Campbell comes across as someone who's really, really strong in his conviction of what he does and what he wants to do. And I think this Lions team will have another good year going forward. And Brian said it as well, look, they are an enjoyable team to watch when they're playing.
I know one thing we haven't even mentioned is the city of Detroit and the degree to which Detroit is behind this team. Like, we saw the people on the streets around the draft as well. I mean, Detroit is a football town. Whatever they might have done in the past between the Pistons and the Red Wings and in hockey and baseball, Detroit is at heart a football town, and it's rocking at the moment. I mean, it kind of reminds me of the way Cincinnati was when they made the Super Bowl. I don't think you can discount that as a factor. Like, there's an excitement and a vibe there.
No, absolutely. And look, rightly so. They've gone through so many years in the wilderness where things just haven't clicked for them. And, they kind of had the odd year where they'd step it up and they'd look really good, but they've never been able to kind of string it together. And this will be the interesting thing now to see, can this team, which looks like it's been really solidly built, can this be the first Lions team that really kind of goes the distance and kind of strings out a couple of seasons, 3 or 4 seasons kind of up at the top? But the fans do deserve it, because, look, they are a historic team, and it is a big franchise, but it hasn't played like a big franchise for a long time, and look, they're rightly excited, and we'll see if that excitement really continues next season
until they win it, and then when you start dumping on them and telling them they're obnoxious like the Eagles, it's the way it goes. Absolutely. So when the Red Sox finally won the World Series. All right, that's the Lions.